Hey guys, I'm Charlotte Cardin and I'm hanging out with Rob on Front Row Live.
Hey Charlotte, it's so awesome to finally get to talk to you. I've been a fan of yours since Meaningless. That was my first introduction to your music, and that song really made me fall in love with your voice and just your lyrics as well. I want to talk about that song before we dive in on this new record. I want to talk about that song and just that process between you, Jason, and Mark, and what that vibe was like in the studio when you guys were creating the song.
All right. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. I'm glad the song resonated with you. When we wrote Meaningless was actually a very yeah, kind of interesting process because Jason, who co-produced it and co-wrote it, um, had actually been holding on to the line, I don't want to live a meaningless life without you since he was a teenager. He's 40 years old now. And so he had that like really special line that he wrote on his classical guitar. He studied classical guitar for a few years in college. And so he had that like super like, yeah, like heart wrenching, like sad line. And he came into the studio one day and he was like, okay, I think it's time that I show you what I've been like holding on to like a precious treasure for a long time. And so we started off with that sentence. It became like a super dancey song. So it's very different from its original like DNA, like musically, but it did spark from an old idea that he had. So, sometimes songwriting can happen in all sorts of ways. And sometimes we just hold on to an idea that we've had for a long time and we just wait for the perfect moment to actually really, dig into the idea and take it to the next step.
What was your initial reaction when you first heard that? Especially after, him holding on to it for so long.
I honestly, my eyes were watering when I first heard it. I was like, it was so beautiful. And Jason doesn't really like sing, like he sings a little bit, for songwriting, but the way it was just so touching, the way that he conveyed the emotion. And I was immediately like, and obviously, like the whole idea of feeling like your life is meaningless without this one person that you love is such a universal thing. It's such and it was definitely a concept that I resonated with. And so, yeah, we took it from there and I, kind of injected my own personal experiences into that song and that but we started with the main like chorus line and then we built from there.
That's such a cool story to hear, especially like, you and Jason have been working together for quite some time. So the fact that like he realized, okay, now is the time to bring this like top secret lyric
Yeah.
into the world, into existence, like that must be amazing. In the same time, like because you two have collaborated for a few years now, um, how do you guys get like how are you guys able to like be comfortable in the studio but yet like you're still able to step out of your comfort zone while working with him and also Lubalin who or Lubalin who you've been
Yeah.
collaborating with for quite some time as well.
Yes. Well, so Jason and Lubalin are my two main collaborators on this album, 99 Nights. And songwriting really brings people closer together. It's a super intimate thing, and you end up like oversharing every day in the studio. It's just one of those things where like we talk about really personal experiences, and Jason and I have been friends for such a long time. I feel like he's one of those friends that is immediately able to create a vibe where people feel comfortable. That's one of his strengths is that I always feel comfortable opening up to him. I feel, he's like a safe space for me. And so and we laugh a lot together. Me, Lubalin and Jason would cry of laughter every single day in the studio. Like that's just like a vibe. It was just such a fun way to write music. And so I feel like when you're surrounded with people that you feel comfortable with, people that are able to bring out the better parts of you, it's so easy to open up and it's so easy to like never run out of inspiration creatively because you have people that are able to take it out of you. So whenever I felt like I was not as inspired, they would spark something or tell a joke or just talk about a personal experience that they had and we would go from there. And I feel like that's just something that's really special about co-writing is that the pool of creativity is kind of endless because you can always feed off someone else's story or someone else's background, and it's just it's a really fun way to create.
What's it like going into the studio, the 3 of you? Do you guys go in and already have that same mentality as far as, like, what kind of song, what kind of sound, what kind of, like, design we're gonna create with this track? Or is it something that you guys still to this day, you guys still sit around and talk about it and see what each one is going through before you start writing the material?
Honestly, every session for me is different. Like sometimes I will walk into the studio and know exactly what I want to write about. Sometimes it just kind of happens. Sometimes, especially for this album, there's a little bit more jamming involved. So, like when we wrote the album or when we started writing the album and when I was still kind of looking for the direction that I wanted the songwriting to go into, um I was going through it was during one summer where I was going through a lot in my personal life, and the moments that I was spending in the studio were kind of my escapism, just a moment where I could enjoy a nice time with friends, and the only thing I was trying to do was like encapsulate musically how I was feeling in the present moment. And so I was just really enjoying like a beautiful moment in the studio with friends. And so there was a little bit more like spontaneous, I guess, like jamming involved in this creative process than there was in, other projects I've worked on. I think because I just wanted to use these sessions as a bit of a I don't want to say like a meditation, but just something that really would ground me at a moment where I didn't feel very grounded. And that to me often comes, through creative outlets. And so there's a little bit more jamming. And when that happens, it's kind of like, how do I feel right this second? And what does that sound like if I grab a guitar? And we just would start creating vibes around a feeling and then would songwrite and tell stories through that initial feeling that we were sharing. So it really happened. It really depends on on the session, but for this album there was a little bit more of that kind of spontaneity involved in the process.
In saying that, would you say that it also impacted the writing process and the lyrics that you were gonna be basically talking about throughout this record?
Definitely. Definitely. I mean, you know how like sometimes I don't know if you have like a diary or a journal that you write in, but
Mhm.
sometimes you'll like write something very spontaneously without even thinking about what you're writing, and then a few days later you just look back at what you wrote and you're like, "Oh, this is actually super, revealing of exactly how I was feeling without even knowing that that's what I was expressing." And there's a little bit of that involved in the creative process in this album. Kind of like an automatic, outlet and just trying to tell stories that felt very spontaneous. And then sometimes listening back, at what we had written the day before or the week before, I was like, oh, this is actually, I talk about anxiety and ego and feeling like you don't fit in and all these things that are actually very meaningful subjects to me, but that were kind of like wrapped in a bit of a more playful package in this album because I think the music that I felt I needed to make myself feel good was that. But so there's kind of that bittersweetness to it where it's like the stories that I told sometimes without even knowing that that's what I was talking about the second I was writing it were actually very revealing of how I was feeling deep down.
So you found yourself being more vulnerable without realizing that you were being vulnerable, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, kind of. I think I was being vulnerable, with my friends. Obviously, like, and not every song was written that way, but I think
Mhm.
sometimes I feel like my music on this album, a lot of the songs started with a very, very real emotion, a very real feeling. And sometimes the story or the facts that I'm sharing in the song kind of shift between reality and an imaginary world, but the feeling that's at the core of the song is extremely personal and real. And so I think I like playing with, those lines that can be a little bit blurred in songwriting between what's really true and what's kind of a more imaginary take on a very real feeling. And so that to me is very vulnerable, but in a different way. It was just about sharing and being with friends and being very spontaneous. I felt like I was being very vulnerable also in the sense that we allowed ourselves to kind of expand the musical playground a little bit more on this album, using more guitar sounds, using instruments that I hadn't really used as much before. There's a little bit more of a raw take to the vocals. It's less polished. It's a little bit more, and it really goes with the DNA of the album and the DNA of the storytelling behind the album as well.
Yeah, you did allow us to focus a little more on your vocals this time around, on some of these songs. What was that like for you recording it? Was that something that was similar to the writing, that you didn't realize that you were really, like, opening up the vocals that much, during these sessions, or did you actively want to open up the vocals like you did, during these sessions?
I wanted to create that proximity that I felt that I didn't have as much on the previous album. The previous
Mm.
album was a little bit more, into, bigger, more like powerful, vocal prowesses. Like it wasn't as conversational. And I had a lot of fun playing with these new ways of telling stories. Like I know that um I love singing is like my main passion. Like I love singing so much and telling stories in all these different ways, and playing with the ways that you can tell a story to me is just so fascinating. And so in the studio, it was new for me to like, talk a little bit more in the songs, be a little bit more gentle in the approach, whisper in some of the songs, just finding ways to convey an emotion that wasn't through like a powerful vocal take. That's like a new way for me as an artist to tell my stories and to share emotions with people. And so that to me was new and really really fun to explore on this album. The way that we it was just a more of a raw way to yeah, to tell a story, and I really enjoyed it. And now I've started touring. I had my first tour date yesterday for this album, and even in a live context, singing those songs is completely different than singing a song that's super, powerful vocally. It's just another way of connecting with the crowd, and that to me is so exciting. I feel like these possibilities are just like endless, and it's really fun for me as an artist to have explored a new way of telling stories on this album.
As far as exploring ways of telling stories, there was something about the intro to Looping that just drew my attention, and I still can't pinpoint what it was. What did you do differently with this song, that you hadn't done on your previous material?
So looping actually starts with a Barbara Streisand sample from "The Way We Were." It's like a super, well-known kind of little tagline that she sings at the beginning of that song, and um, looping was written in a super like playful kind of like weird way. The story behind that song is that we wrote it in London with a producer, an amazing producer called, his name is Felix Joseph, and Mr. Hudson also co-produced it. So it was me, Jason, Felix, and Mr. Hudson in the studio. And Mr. Hudson had brought his dog into the studio, and his dog is the cutest little dog ever. Like everyone loves his dog. She's just so, so gentle and cute. And so we were like, oh, let's write a song about Judy, his dog. Let's just like write a song about Judy. That's how we came up with the line, they say I see life in black and white. So that was kind of like the first line, because we all know that dogs don't see a lot of colors, etc. And then like an hour into the songwriting, we're like, okay, we're not gonna write a song about a dog. This is kind of like ridiculous. But then Jason was like, well, you know what, Charlotte, you actually kind of see life in black and white. Sometimes you really have looping thoughts, and I do. Like I have spiraling, thoughts in my mind sometimes, and it's something I've been trying to deal with. And so the song shifted from being a song about a dog to a song about like spiraling thoughts. That's like a really like heavy subject, really close to my heart. And then at the same time, Felix was sampling the Barbara Streisand, part. It was just like this kind of like crazy session that mashed a lot of different worlds together, and it just ended up being something super special that I love. But once again, you never know where the inspiration will come from. Sometimes it's from a dog and someone's, just sampling something randomly because it sounds cool, and ending up being something that's really meaningful. You never know.
You guys were all in different, like, pages creating something completely different, and you were able to just mash something together and, like,
And to
make
make
it work.
something. Yeah, exactly. But that one was definitely one of the funnier ones.
Well, we're talking about dogs. Let's talk about Puppy because I love that you got to collaborate with Jorgen on this one. And not just Jorgen, you also got to work with Upsal, who I really love. Her way of songwriting and just her delivery with her music is just incredible. So I'm curious what that process was like between the three of you. And how do you feel that they allowed you to open up more and be more creative with this song?
It was such a fun session. Honestly, it's just one of those sessions where we had never met before. Jorgen and I and Upsal and I had never met before. But it was just one of those sessions that, when you meet people and it just feels so natural and you just connect immediately creatively. Jason and I had been holding on to the um, puppy out the window. I just want to feel the wind blow idea for a while. We had an initial demo. We didn't have any verses, just that line that really felt good and that felt like it really encapsulated a feeling that I wanted to write about, that like feeling of just wanting to let go of something. And sometimes, your entire life goes to shit and you still choose happiness. That moment where you're like, you know what? Everything is wrong right now, but I choose myself and I choose to be happy. And I feel like that's something I had never really written about before. And that session was just we shared that idea with them, and immediately Taylor Upsall had amazing lines for ideas for verses, and it just kind of really grew super fast into a song that felt really good. Once again, a little idea that we loved, that we had been holding on to, not really knowing exactly how to put it. And Jorgen is an amazing producer. And he just like immediately kind of encapsulated the vibe of that lyric into something that felt amazing musically. And so in a few hours the song was written. A lot of the vocal takes that you hear in the actual song, sorry, is are from that first session we did together. Just like first takes, kind of, just sometimes it just feels right, and you're in the right place at the right time with the right people, and something beautiful is created. And that's exactly how I feel about that one.
It's amazing how you can be having so many different experiences throughout this body of work, whether you're recording in London, LA, or Toronto, and you're working with so many different producers and songwriters. Out of these 12 tracks, which one do you feel that made it difficult to either finalize or just try and figure out what this song was trying to be about?
I think the hardest one to write was definitely Next to You. It's the last song on the album, the last song that was written for the album as well. I wrote that one in Montreal with Patrick Watson, who's an amazing artist who I have admired for years and years and years. And it took about like 7 months to write. It was such a long process. And not like a 7 months where it's like, like you meet up, once and then 6 months later. It was like every week or two we would meet up, add a word, add a chord, go back and erase something. And what's really interesting about this particular process is that I was, as I mentioned before, like going through a lot in my personal life when we were writing this album. And especially for that song, I was kind of making lots of different decisions in my life. And so the song took so long to write that it kind of um, evolved chronologically as I was going through things in my life, going back into the studio and being like, oh, we could add this because, I went through this week. And then, so it kind of built as I was deciding that I was going to leave my hometown and move somewhere else. Felt like I needed new challenges. Like I just felt like I needed this, like just this, breath of fresh air in my life. And the song is about leaving something behind that you love, but that is not allowing you to grow to your full potential. And so it was a really interesting time of my life to write that song. So it feels extremely personal. It's also one of my favorite songs on the album. I kind of went through a huge love and hate relationship with the song because it took so long to write. At one point I wanted to give up, and then Patrick was like, "No, like we need to finish this." And it was just like this very long process, but extremely rewarding because in the end it's just like such a personal song, and it's very, very close to my heart.
That belief that you had in the song from the beginning, like that's some strong that's a strong belief. Like if I were to try something for that long, I don't know if I could still want to finalize it or create it.
Yeah. Well, trust me, I doubt the entire time. Like, it's all Patrick. He was like, I know this song has potential, and we had to restructure it so many times. Like it didn't make sense for a while, and then we would like play around with parts, and he was like, we need to finish this. Like trust the process. And I was like, really racking my brains on it, but it ended up being super rewarding, and yeah, I love that song. So
Trust the process is a difficult line to actually rely on
I
sometimes.
agree. I agree. Especially in songwriting, it's like, especially in something artistic, it's like, no, let's just write another one. And it's like, no, like
Yeah.
yeah, it was a process.
Well, now this album is out. We all get blessed with it, and you are now on the road for the 99 Nights tour, and it's going to be an incredible like run that you're going to have. It's going to bleed into the new year as well. What are you excited most about this run, and what can fans look forward to during it?
I'm just so excited to share those songs in a live context. Like these songs are very like kind of like bandy, and they tell stories that I hope people will relate to, and there's something especially about this album that I feel will make even more sense in a live context. The album was created collectively with my friends. It's meant to be shared. It's meant to be spent in a real moment, and hopefully we get to create those connections live. Like I feel like music is so powerful always, but in a live context, it just, the emotion is even more, it can be translated in an even more in a closer way, and we've definitely started feeling that playing a few of the new songs live during the summer. But kicking off the store just feels really exciting for us because those new songs feel special, and I'm just excited to share them with people in a bunch of different cities. Some cities we've never been to before, some cities we're going back to, so it's just a really fun tour to look forward to.
Amazing. Well, congratulations with the release of the album. Best of luck on this tour. Have fun. I'll see you in LA. And thanks again for hanging out with me, Charlotte.
Thanks so much for having me.